She made a young man cry while watching him lose his job, and she even smiled. For 10 years, a billionaire's wife spread fear everywhere she went. No one had the courage to stand up to her. No one even tried. Until the day a bankrupt waitress, with nothing left to lose, discovered this woman's darkest secret. This is the story of how a single person brought down a monster, not with money, not with influence, but with a single word. And when we reach the end, you will probably never look at powerful people the same way again. It sounds like a revenge story, but in truth, it is about something far stronger than that. Stay with me. In the heart of New York, there was a restaurant called Golden Rose. It was not just any restaurant. It was the kind of place where one dinner cost more than an entire month's salary for many people. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. The cutlery was made of real silver. Even the air seemed expensive. In that world of luxury and whispers, one name made everyone tense. Helen Moore. She was married to Robert Moore, a billionaire and owner of a technology holding company that controlled half the market. His money raised buildings that touched the sky. But Helen had built something else, an empire of fear. Every Friday, exactly at 8 p.m., she arrived at the same corner table, always dressed as if she were walking a red carpet, always ready to destroy the life of anyone who dared to displease her. The staff trembled when they saw her walk in. They knew what she was capable of. There was the case of Julian, a young man saving money for college. He was fired on the spot because the sleeve of his uniform passed too close to her plate. He did not even touch the food. Helen not only demanded that he be dismissed, she watched him remove his apron while crying, and according to those who were there, she actually smiled. That was the kind of person Helen Moore was. It was into this world that a woman named Claire Nolan stepped. Claire was 32 years old, and 3 months earlier, her life had collapsed. She worked as a research assistant for one of the best investigative journalists in New York. She loved what she did. She was good at finding details no one else noticed, at connecting dots that seemed impossible to connect, until the newspaper shut down the investigative department. Cost cuts, they said. Within days, her dream was over. Now there was Claire, adjusting the stiff collar of a waitress uniform, trying to remember which side to serve the bread from, with the feeling that she had fallen from the sky and landed in a completely different universe. On her first day, an older waiter named Andrew pulled her aside. Andrew had worked at the Golden Rose for 15 years. His face carried every one of those years. "Do you see that corner over there?" he whispered, pointing to the isolated table. "That's where she sits." "Who?" Claire asked. "Helen Moore. Robert Moore's wife. The billionaire. You know who he is, right?" Claire nodded. Everyone knew who Robert Moore was. He lived in the headlines. His companies were called revolutionary in business magazines. "Exactly," Andrew continued, lowering his voice even more. "His wife is our worst nightmare. One small slip, one wrong detail, and she gets you fired. And it doesn't stop there. She makes sure you never work in a good restaurant again. I've seen that woman ruin people's lives just for fun." Claire's stomach tightened. "She's really that cruel?" she asked. Andrew let out a bitter laugh. "Last month, she said a waiter's presence was contaminating her food. He didn't even touch the plate, just stood nearby. She caused such a huge scene that he was fired immediately. They say he had to move back to the countryside because he couldn't find a job anywhere here in New York." That night, Claire saw Helen enter the restaurant for the first time. She walked like a queen heading to her throne. Her dress clearly cost more than Claire would earn in a year. Jewelry sparkled around her neck, cold, flawless. But what caught Claire's attention the most were her eyes. A cold, calculating stare. Helen's gaze swept across the room like searchlights. Claire saw people sink into their chairs as those eyes passed over them. Beside her walked her husband, Robert, tall, elegant, with a few gray strands at his temples. But he looked tired, worn down, like a man trapped inside a beautiful prison. Claire was assigned to work near their table, close enough to see and hear everything. She spent the first hour focused on her own customers, trying to learn the complicated choreography of high-end service, but she couldn't help hearing Helen's voice. It was low and controlled, yet sharp like a blade. She sent the wine back, claiming it tasted ordinary. She complained that the lighting made her husband look old. Each complaint was a test, a way of reminding everyone around her that she had power, and they did not. Then came the moment that changed everything. A young waiter named Philip was serving the table next to Helen's. As he leaned in to place a dish, the sleeve of his uniform hovered for a fraction of a second over the edge of her bread plate. It didn't touch anything, nothing spilled, but Helen recoiled as if he had tried to poison her. "Excuse me," she said. Just 2 words were enough to silence the entire restaurant. Philip froze, his face pale. "Yes, Mrs. Moore," he whispered. Do you realize what you've just done? Your sleeve passed over my plate. Over my food. It's contaminated. I've completely lost my appetite. She pushed the untouched plate away with one finger, as if it were trash. The manager, Mr. Alvarez, appeared within seconds, apologizing, offering another dish, another meal, anything at all. Philip trembled like someone waiting for a death sentence. Claire watched the entire scene. This wasn't about hygiene. It was about power. A public execution meant to remind everyone of their place in Helen's world. As she held a water jug, watching that cruelty unfold, Claire felt something ignite in her chest. It was the same feeling she used to have as a researcher. The fire that always rose when she saw injustice, abuse, someone crushing others simply because they could. Andrew had called the restaurant the Dragon's Lair. He was right. But what he didn't know was that Claire Nolan had spent 3 years learning how to find cracks in a dragon's armor, and she suspected this dragon had many. If stories like this make you think about power, abuse, and courage, it's worth staying with us. Subscribe quietly, silently even, just so you don't miss the next stories. Now let's return to what happened to Claire. 1 week later, fate placed Claire directly in Helen's line of fire. It was Friday again. The restaurant was packed. Then the news came. The waiter assigned to Helen's table had called in sick. In the staff area, Mr. Alvarez looked like a general choosing someone for an impossible mission. His eyes landed on Claire. "Nolan," he called softly. "You stay calm under pressure. Tonight, you take table 8. Table 8. Helen's table. Claire heard the murmurs of pity from the other staff. Andrew caught her eye and shook his head in a silent warning, but she simply replied, "Yes, sir." She spent the next 15 minutes preparing as if for battle. She memorized every detail of Helen's preferences. Still water, no ice, with a paper-thin slice of lemon. Bread basket only with sourdough. Every tiny detail had to be perfect. When Helen arrived with Robert, Claire was ready. She approached the table calmly. "Good evening, sir, and my name is Claire, and I'll be serving you tonight." Helen's cold eyes scanned Claire from head to toe, judging, dismissing. She didn't return the greeting. "Still water with lemon," she said, already looking at the menu. Claire executed everything flawlessly. The water was served exactly as requested. The bread basket arrived just the way Helen demanded. For a moment, Claire thought she might survive the night. Then Helen ordered the onion soup. 10 minutes later, Claire placed the dish on the table. Steam rose from the bowl. The cheese was perfectly gratinated, golden on top. Claire had watched the chef finish the dish. Helen stared at the soup for a few seconds, picked up the spoon, dipped it in, raised it toward her lips, then stopped. Slowly, she lowered the spoon, her eyes narrowing. "Is there a problem in the kitchen today?" she asked in a tone loud enough to draw attention from nearby tables. Claire's heart raced. "No, Mrs. Moore. The soup meets the house standard. Is something wrong?" "It's cold," Helen announced confidently, so several people could hear. "Completely cold. I expect hot soup." "That's not difficult to understand." Claire knew the soup wasn't cold. She had seen the steam. But this wasn't about temperature. It was a test. Helen wanted to see her hesitate, beg, humiliate herself. Instead, something shifted inside Claire. The investigator woke up. She began to observe. Helen didn't look truly offended. She looked expectant. Waiting for fear, for desperation, for submission. Claire decided not to give her that. "I apologize, Mrs. Moore," she replied in a firm, professional voice. "I'll bring you another soup, piping hot." She reached out to take the plate, but Helen placed her hand on the rim, her perfectly manicured nails tapping lightly against the porcelain. "That won't be necessary," she said coldly. "The moment is already ruined." She turned to her husband. "Do you see this, Robert? Even here, standards are completely collapsing." Robert sighed, staring at his glass. "It's just soup, Helen," he murmured. "It's never just soup, Robert," she snapped. "It's about standards, standards this waitress clearly doesn't understand." Her gaze snapped back to Claire, sharp as glass. "What is your name again?" "Claire, Claire," she repeated, as if the name tasted bad. "Well, Claire, I suggest you learn the difference between hot and cold if you want to keep working here for even one more day." The threat hung heavy in the air. Several people were watching the scene. It was the night's entertainment. Claire kept her eyes steady. She didn't look away, didn't show fear. "I understand perfectly, Mrs. Moore. Thank you for the feedback. I will make sure the rest of the meal is impeccable." She picked up the bowl and walked back to the kitchen, feeling everyone's eyes on her back. In the kitchen, the chef, Rick, was already irritated. "That soup was perfect," he grumbled. I checked the temperature myself. That woman is a monster. I know, Claire said quietly. But she isn't angry because of the soup. That night, Helen barely spoke directly to Claire, only cold gestures and sharp looks. But Claire noticed something. Helen was watching her with a new discomfort in her eyes. The target had not reacted the way people usually did. She hadn't cried. She hadn't begged. She hadn't apologized beyond what was necessary. And for someone addicted to control, that was unsettling. An old sentence from Claire's mentor returned to her mind. The cruelest people often live in the most fragile houses, built on lies. You just have to find the right crack. Claire decided to look for that crack. She started behind the scenes. Restaurants are like libraries of stories. And Golden Rose was full of stories about Helen. In the staff pantry, during breaks, between the smell of coffee and cleaning products, Claire heard everything. Remember when she said the sommelier insulted her for suggesting an Italian wine? One employee said. She claimed he was implying her taste was simple. No one understood what she meant. And that day she made the hostess change her lipstick in the middle of service, another added. She said the color was vulgar. The girl cried in the bathroom. Claire collected it all. A pattern appeared. Helen was obsessed with appearances. Everything about her felt like a performance. The refined, elegant woman, born into wealth. Any crack in that image made her explode. That said something crucial. She wasn't confident. She was afraid. On a calmer Tuesday, Claire leaned against the counter beside Andrew, who was drying glasses. You've been here the longest, Andrew, she said casually. What was she like when she first started coming here? Andrew thought for a moment. Different, he said. Or trying to be what she is now, but she couldn't quite pull it off. That was about 10 years ago, right after she married Robert. Would always see her watching other tables. Copying how people held their forks. How they pronounced French words. Like she was studying for a role. He lowered his voice even more. And there's something else. Before she married Robert, no one had ever heard of her. I've worked in other expensive restaurants. I recognize rich families from a distance. But Helen Moore appeared out of nowhere when she got engaged, like she didn't exist before. A woman with no past. That echoed in Claire's mind. That night, in her small apartment, she opened her laptop and began digging. She searched for Helen's supposed maiden name, Helen Parker, from a traditional family. That was the version repeated in magazines. The results were strange. There were women with that name, but none with a background that matched the billionaire's wife. No old family photos. Nothing in society pages. Nothing consistent. It felt like an invented name. So Claire searched old news about Helen and Robert's engagement. She found short pieces on major sites, magazines, society columns. They all said the same thing, a discreet romance, a private background, a passion for charity projects. Everything was too neat, too polished. Then she started looking through photos from charity events Robert attended before he met Helen. If Helen truly came from wealth, she should have appeared somewhere. Nothing. Claire changed her approach. She used a reverse image search tool and uploaded an official photo of Helen taken at a charity ball years earlier. At first, the results were repetitive, the same photo on different websites. But several pages later, something different appeared. An old site, nearly offline, from a small-town modeling agency from the early 2000s. Among many photos, one face made Claire freeze. A younger woman, maybe 22. Over-bleached blonde hair. Heavy makeup. But the face shape was unmistakable. The sharp jawline. The high cheekbones. The hard eyes. It was Helen. But the name under the photo wasn't Helen. It was Leah Brooks. Claire's heart sped up. She opened a new search. Leah Brooks, model, small town. The results appeared one after another. Small local newspaper items, notes about pageants, and then the big discovery. An old fan forum for a 2004 reality show called Dreams on the Track. The show followed young women who worked as promotional models at car races, dramatic, loud, desperate for fame. One of the most talked about contestants, known for fights and arguments, was a girl named Leah Brooks. Claire clicked a video a fan had uploaded. The quality was poor, but it was enough. There was a raw, younger version of Helen, tight jeans, a racing team jacket, screaming at another contestant over borrowed makeup. Her way of speaking had nothing to do with today's refined voice. It was a strong small-town accent, unpolished. Claire leaned back in her chair, her heart pounding. The elegant billionaire's wife, respected in high society, was actually the former reality show contestant Leah Brooks, who had vanished and built a new identity. But Claire needed more. On the forum, she found a user who seemed to know that era well. Claire sent a message saying she was a researcher writing about forgotten reality shows. 2 days later, a reply came. The woman's name was Mia, a former schoolmate of Leah. They arranged a call. Leah Brooks, Mia said on the phone. I haven't heard that name in years. She always wanted to leave our town. She hated everything here. She used to spend hours practicing a fancy voice in the mirror. She studied fashion magazines like textbooks. And after the show? Claire asked. The reality show didn't help her at all, Mia explained. She left labeled as loud, dramatic, exactly what she didn't want. She disappeared. Then years later, I saw a photo in a magazine, married to a billionaire, under another name, Helen Parker Moore. She got what she wanted. She erased Leah Brooks. Claire thanked her, hung up, and sat in silence, staring at her screen. Now everything made sense. Helen's cruelty. The humiliation of the staff. The obsession with appearances. Every attack felt like an attempt to crush any reminder of the Leah from the past. Claire held Helen's biggest secret. The question was, what was she going to do with it? 3 weeks after the soup incident, Helen returned to Golden Rose. It was Friday. When she walked in, the mood shifted, but something was different. She was alone. Robert wasn't with her. And instead of her usual glamorous dress, she wore a severe black suit with hard lines. She looked like she had come to war. She didn't wait to be led to her table. She walked straight to the corner, her eyes scanning the room until they found Claire. She lifted one finger, calling her the way someone summons a subordinate. The manager tried to intervene, but Claire made a small gesture to show it was fine. She knew this moment was inevitable. She smoothed her apron, took a deep breath, and walked to the table. Good evening, Mrs. Moore, she said. Helen didn't respond. She only pointed to the chair across from her. Sit down, Claire. Claire hesitated. I'm on duty, Sit, Helen repeated, low and threatening. Or tomorrow morning I buy this restaurant and turn it into a parking lot. It's a simple choice. Claire sat down, upright, holding Helen's gaze. The room watched in silence. I don't know what game you think you're playing, Helen began, leaning forward. I don't know how you found that name, or what you plan to do with it, but let me make something very clear. She paused, her voice turning even colder. I had your entire life investigated. I know your journalism career ended without glory. I know about your debts. I know about your tiny apartment that you can barely afford. You are nobody. A frozen smile appeared on her face. When I'm done with you, you won't get a job even cleaning toilets. I will call every place you try to work. I'll say you're a thief, a blackmailer, unstable. I'll sue you until you can't lift your head. I'll destroy every piece of your life. Do you understand? Claire listened without breaking eye contact. She knew this was the last attack of someone who could feel power slipping through her fingers. Then Claire leaned slightly forward and spoke in a firm, quiet voice. On one thing, you're right. I am a researcher, and I'm very good at what I do. I know you are not Helen Parker from any traditional family. I know you are Leah Brooks, former contestant on Dreams on the Track. Helen's face hardened. Lies, she muttered. Claire continued. I know about the show. I know the racing circuit, the recordings, the final episode. I know about the meltdown you had during the track girl contest. I know about the cheap tiara. I know the screaming, the crying, the footage that never aired, but exists. And I know that footage can still be found. At those words, Helen went pale. Her breathing shortened. Claire kept her voice steady. Here's what's going to happen now. You are going to leave this restaurant. You will not come back. You will not chase, threaten, or humiliate anyone on this team again. You will leave us in peace. She paused. If I hear even one comment that you caused trouble for anyone here, I will find those recordings. I will send them to every newspaper, every gossip site, and every person in your social circle. Your husband might ignore drama over soup, but I want to see what he thinks when he watches Helen Moore being introduced as Leah Brooks, shown on a screen fighting over a plastic tiara. The words landed like precise blows. For a few seconds, Helen just stared at Claire. Fear in her eyes turned into hatred, but there was no more control. No way out. Slowly, with trembling hands, Helen stood up. She said nothing. She didn't look at anyone. She crossed the dining room in silence and walked out of Golden Rose. The doors closed behind her, and it felt like an invisible weight had been lifted from the air. For a moment, the entire room was completely silent. Then, from the kitchen, a timid clap began, growing louder and louder. The staff who had suffered for years were finally free. The manager approached Claire, still in disbelief. I don't even know what to say, he murmured. Claire let out the breath she'd been holding, stood up, and picked up the water jug. Table 6 needs a refill, she said with a small smile. Across the room, Andrew gave her a slow, respectful nod. Claire had faced the dragon, and won. Not with shouting. Not with rage. But with the silent power of truth. Because in the end, people who intimidate others, no matter how much money or power they have, are often just scared people hiding behind masks. And when someone finally pulls that mask off, what's left isn't a monster. It's a fragile human being. And the illusion ends. The news of what Claire did spread through the city's restaurant world. Not the details, no one knew exactly what had been said, but the fact, someone had finally stood up to Helen Moore. Did you hear what happened at Golden Rose? Servers whispered in kitchens and pantries. A waitress put Mrs. Moore in her place. The story grew the way stories grow, but deep down it carried a simple truth. Courage matters. Standing up to injustice matters. Refusing to be crushed matters. Helen never appeared in that area again. She disappeared into her mansion like a ghost trapped in a golden cage, haunted by a past she could no longer control. Some people felt sorry for her. Claire did not. She has everything, Claire told Andrew at the end of a shift. Money, influence, opportunities, and she chose to use it to hurt people who couldn't defend themselves. That's not someone who deserves pity. That's someone who needed to be stopped. Andrew agreed. What you did was brave, Claire. It was the right thing. But Claire didn't feel like a hero. She felt like she had simply done what needed to be done. She didn't stay a waitress for long. On the night of the confrontation, there had been an attentive customer in the dining room, a businessman named Edward Lane, the owner of a private investigation company. He watched how Claire carried herself. A week later, he asked her to meet for coffee. I watched how you handled all of that, he said. The way you think, how you stay calm under pressure, how you investigate, those are rare qualities. I could use someone like that on my team. He placed a business card on the table. You want to hire me as an investigator? Claire asked. I want to hire you as my lead investigator, Edward replied. The work you did to uncover Mrs. Moore's past is exactly what my clients need. Someone who can find the truth, no matter how deeply it's hidden. Claire looked at the card for a few seconds, then smiled for real. And when she began. 3 months later, she was back to what she loved. Investigating, uncovering truths, helping people who needed answers. But she never forgot Golden Rose, and she never forgot the lesson she learned there. Because what keeps abusive people standing, whether in a schoolyard or in a luxury restaurant, is always the same thing. Silence. They count on other people's fear. They count on the it's better not to get involved. But when one person stands up, just one, says no, and refuses fear, that is enough to bring down the entire facade. If this story has made you think of someone who uses power to crush others, take a moment to save this video, leave a quiet like, and follow the channel. It helps this story reach someone who may need to hear exactly this today. 6 months after leaving the restaurant, Claire received an unexpected call. It was Robert. Ms. Nolan, he said in a tired voice. I called to thank you. Thank me for what? Claire asked, genuinely surprised. For having the courage to do what I should have done many years ago, he replied. I knew what she did. I knew she was cruel. But I convinced myself it wasn't my problem, that she had always been like that. I kept making excuses. There was a pause. We're getting divorced, he said. I should have made that decision a long time ago, but I was a coward. You showed me what real courage is. After the call ended, Claire sat in silence for a while. She hadn't planned to save anyone. She hadn't planned to destroy any marriage. She simply refused to stay quiet while someone abused their power. Sometimes, that is all it takes to change everything. So if this story leaves you with one message, it's this. You don't have to be rich to be strong. You don't have to be famous to be brave. You don't have to be perfect to stand up for what is right. Sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is simply refuse fear, refuse to let the abuser win, refuse to stay silent in the face of injustice. Claire Nolan was just a waitress who had lost her dream job. She had no money, no connections, no protection. But she had something far more valuable, integrity, courage, and the deep certainty that cruelty should not be ignored. And that was enough. More than enough. Because in the end, many tyrants are just scared people hiding behind money, prestige, titles, and expensive clothes. Underneath it all, they are terrified that someone will discover who they really are. And when a single person chooses to look past the mask and speak the truth clearly, the castle of lies begins to crumble. Helen spent years building a perfect image, crushing anyone who threatened that illusion. But it was all resting on lies. And lies, no matter how expensive, always crack. The truth finds a way out. Sometimes, all it needs is someone willing to bring it into the light. That person can be anyone. It can be someone simple, invisible in the eyes of those who think they are big. One day, that person could be you. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of an unfair situation, leave your like, comment what city you're watching from, and share this with someone who needs courage today. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe calmly. Your support helps these messages travel farther.